We have with us Eric Allison, Chief Product Officer at Joby Aviation. Eric, thank you for joining. Tell us about this fabulous background that I can see in your visual.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. So I'm sitting here in a mock-up of our aircraft, the Joby S4 aircraft, which is a all-electric vertical takeoff and landing air taxi that we are in the process of certifying with the FAA to launch in the near future, to provide people with amazing new options on how they can commute. We're here with this mock-up in Grand Central Terminal in New York City, one of the most interesting markets, we think, for this type of technology. And we're showing it off here in Vanderbilt Hall over the next few days to give people a little bit of a taste of what this future commute might look like.
So when is this going to go live, Eric? You're there in a mock-up, but when are we going to see the real thing taking off and landing in our cities?
Yeah, so we are targeting a commercial launch of this vehicle in the end of 2025 in Dubai, which is one of our launch partners that we announced a partnership with earlier this year, where we'll be the exclusive air taxi provider in Dubai. And we're doing a lot of work with them and the regulator there to piggyback on the work that we're doing with the FAA, which is necessary. We have to finish our certification process with the FAA so that we can actually launch in the U.S. commercially once that full certification is done here in the U.S.
I'm heading to Dubai actually next week, so I'm going to be excited to imagine your taxis in the air. Let's talk about the overall theme of the evolution of travel and daily commuting, Eric. And there's a little bit of an on-the-ground predecessor coming about for you. Companies like Tesla preparing its October 10th unveiling of the robo-taxi, right. Uber preparing self-driving launch on its app in 2025 via Waymo. Do you think that people's appetite for being in autonomous aircraft vehicles is going to change quickly, or do you think adoption is going to be slow?
So we actually think that having more opportunities to take technology and make people's lives better is really what we're after here, right? So I actually came from Uber before Uber divested the team that I was running in the pandemic, the Elevate team, which is working on flying cars, air taxis, integrated into the Uber platform to Joby. And so we have a partnership with Uber. Actually, this event that I'm here with this mock-up in Grand Central Terminal is partially sponsored by Uber and Delta, our other major commercial launch partner that we have. So we really see this as a technology that can make everything better. So that as you think about layering on different types of options for transportation, not just with one mode, but with multiple modes that end up being strung together. So in some sense, you could think of the canonical trip that we could be offering people in just a couple of years right here in New York City is you open the Uber app, you select the Joby option to get you to your Delta flight. And so an Uber picks you up, takes you to the nearest takeoff and landing spot, which is called Skyports. You are kind of met with other people going to the airport at that same time because there's just so much demand at any moment in time for people looking for transportation. Something like 50 million trips per day happening in a city like New York City. And then land close as we can to the terminal and you get right to your Delta flight. So that's kind of that vision of what true software enabled, in some sense, end-to-end mobility can look like with partners like Uber and Delta in the mix to make this just as easy as possible for people to get to where they want to go.
The great irony in what you're saying, Eric, is demand for aviation solutions possibly could be driven by increased congestion on the roads, in part caused by the popularity of ride shares such as Uber. Talk to us a little bit about the dynamic for airborne taxis as opposed to on-the-ground car transportation.
So one of the great things about air taxis is because we're designing this as a shared experience, fundamentally. Air travel in a commercial airliner right now, the economics of that is very dependent on filling seats. And so similarly, we are designing this aircraft to have multiple seats, revenue-producing seats, as part of the fundamental idea of how this service will work. So our aircraft has one seat for a pilot, so it's actually flown by a commercial pilot. These are not going to be autonomous vehicles out of the gate, even though in some sense autonomy in aviation at certain levels is already here in some sense. The autopilots have been a thing for a long time in commercial aviation. And we think that inevitably there's a trend that goes that way. In fact, we just acquired a company called Exec that's doing a lot of really pioneering work around certifying fully autonomous versions of existing airplanes. But this aircraft, the primary focus will start out with the commercial pilot, 4 revenue seats, and then we'll use the software to fill those seats. But what that means is that every trip taken by one of our air taxis potentially takes 4 trips off the road, because you have many or most cars have single occupants that are driving. It's the average is like 1.2 or something overall. And so we think there's a lot of potential for how this technology actually makes the ground transportation better as well, because you have a high utilization vehicle that can be operating back to back to back. So many trips per day can be taken off the road by one of our air taxis, which we think is really exciting. It's a way, again, of having kind of follow-on benefits for all the people affected by this type of technology.
So based on what you just described, Eric, where you do, at least at the outset, have a commercial pilot, what distinguishes what Joby's planning to do from, for example, Blade, which is the helicopter service, also has partnerships with airlines to go direct from the likes of New York City to the terminals at JFK? How would you be differentiated?
Yeah, so the really important thing about this technology is that we are all electric. So this is a battery-powered aircraft. And what that lets us do is rethink how you design the fundamentals of how an airplane operates. So this aircraft has 6 propellers, and that can tilt. So they can transition from pointing up like a helicopter to forward like an airplane. Critically, what this lets you do is design that propulsion system for 2 really critical pieces. One is high reliability, which translates into lower operating costs because of less required maintenance and all of the things that have to happen to keep the aircraft operating at the highest level of safety all the time. The second thing is it lets you rethink how you design the aircraft in order to address the number one problem that helicopters have, which is noise. So we know that noise is a real problem, and it's actually the number one barrier. We think is kind of a largely in many areas an insurmountable barrier to scale for this type of technology. Cost is really important as well, but cost goes directly to those maintenance costs and the operating costs of the vehicle. So those 2 factors really are really important. This aircraft is kind of unprecedentedly quiet. In takeoff and landing, if you were 300 feet away from the aircraft, we could have this conversation in real life, and you wouldn't have to raise your voice because the takeoff and landing noise is something like 65 decibels, which is very quiet for an airplane. In overflight, though, when it converts from that vertical mode to the forward-facing propellers flying like an airplane mode, at 1,000 feet, 1,200 feet, somewhere in there, it's basically silent. So you're talking something more like 45 dB, which means you have to actually whisper to hear the airplane fly over because it's so quiet at typical operating altitudes for small aircraft like this. So we think noise, and we actually have a little experience here, right here in our display at Grand Central Terminal, where you can actually put on headphones and hear that difference. We did some calibrated measurements of a bunch of different types of aircraft along with our aircraft at the same altitude, the same weights, and to just kind of make that really tangible for people to hear that difference. And so we think that's a really, really important and honestly somewhat underappreciated aspect of how do you get to scalability for this type of service. Because when you unblock that noise piece, when people want this technology in their communities instead of not wanting it in their communities because they don't like the overflight noise, they don't like the racket that's caused, you actually end up with, I think, a much bigger market overall than exists today.
Talk to us too about airborne safety, Eric, because one of the criticisms of helicopter travel is that if you actually look at the safety statistics relative to other forms of transportation, it does not fare as favorably. Talk to us about how you think about that.
So safety is baked into our DNA down to the actual design level of the aircraft. So we actually have established kind of a voluntary end-to-end safety management system in our company across the manufacturing and the operations side of it. I should mention that we are very vertically integrated. So Joby's taken a little bit of a different approach to the market than some others. We actually are vertically integrated both, I think, downwardly into our supply chain. So we build all of our own motors, our own computers, our own battery systems. We build all that ourselves. We're building factories to be able to do that. And then we actually are vertically integrating to the customer as well. We're developing the operational procedures. We actually already have a certification from the FAA for a small airline that we'll then add these aircraft to as we start to scale up. And then we're developing the app technology that will be able to deliver it on demand to people and then also integrate with partners like Uber and Delta to make this accessible to anyone who wants to just take a trip whenever they want to do it. So because we have that breadth of integration, vertical integration, we actually are developing this broad safety management system. So it's best in class type of an approach for how do you think about safety at the very core of how you build out the different functions of the company. So that's kind of from a process standpoint, but from a design standpoint, this electric propulsion technology actually enables you to architecturally think about aircraft differently. So I'll give you an example. There's not one battery in the airplane. There's actually four batteries. There's four high voltage batteries that are completely independent from each other. And the way that they're connected to the rest of the system is very carefully thought through so that you can actually have a loss of any one of those batteries and still operate safely. Similarly, the motors, there's six propellers, but each of those propellers is driven by one single motor with almost no moving parts, just the motor itself. There's no gears, there's no transmission, there's none of those aspects of kind of traditional aviation technology. It's just a motor, but that motor is actually two motors that are interwoven together but electrically independent from each other, driven by independent electronics that are then driven by independent batteries. So we can architecturally build these chains of redundancy into the aircraft with this technology that you just can't do with traditional aviation technology. And that's what's so exciting from an engineering standpoint, that you can actually rethink some of this and do it in a way that really enables you to make an aircraft tailored to this mission of air taxis that people are going to want to be in on a daily basis.
The enthusiasm is palpable, Eric, which is terrific to see on the engineering side. Talk to us a little bit about some of your strategic and commercial partners. You've referenced your partnership with Delta. Toyota has stepped up to the plate in a big way in supporting Joby, including news breaking today that there'll be another $500 million investment into your company. Talk to us about the Toyota relationship.
That's right. So Toyota is our largest outside investor and just announced this new investment of $500 million in two tranches, the first of which we expect to close later this year, the second next year, equal tranches. Which is incredibly exciting for us. And then there's also going to be a manufacturing strategic alliance as part of that second tranche that will close as well, which is going to be incredibly important, I think, for not just for us, but the kind of the vision that this then casts for the whole industry about how an amazing manufacturing powerhouse like Toyota can partner with us to think about mobility in a whole new way. And so they came in, one of the venture arms of Toyota actually invested in us early, and then Toyota led our Series C back in 2019 and brought in between 2018 and 2019 a total of about $394 million. And then now with this additional 500 that they will be investing, their stake is just shy of 900 million overall in terms of invested money in us. So it's pretty exciting to have a partner like Toyota that understands what it means to scale manufacturing. We already have Toyota members in our factories working side by side with our engineers on and helping us understand the Toyota production system, helping us understand how do you think about this, the next steps in manufacturing already, and that's just going to increase with this new investment from Toyota.
I know that it's a slightly provocative question, Eric. Like, again, I can sense your passion for your business. Joby isn't the only electric aircraft pioneer out there. We've got Archer Aviation and Chrysler parent actually invested in that business. Another example of where the auto industry seems to be trying to penetrate yours. What differentiates Joby from Archer, which is also public?
Yeah, so I mean, we think that there's going to be a lot of space in this industry for success, and so we celebrate what others are doing as well. Joby really, though, has been one of the pioneers from the very beginning. We were founded in 2009, and really at the cusp of the in sometimes revolution around thinking about how do you apply electric propulsion technology to aviation, not just electric cars. I mean, that was before or very early on in the electric car journey. I think that maybe the Tesla Roadster had just come out or was somewhere in there in that time frame. And certainly no one was taking EVs on the road very seriously back then. But what we realized is that there is an equally important application of how do you electrify, and then by electrifying, being able to expose, like I mentioned, these new capabilities of quiet flight, of emissions-free flight, of doing something quite different with this technology to enable people to interact with mobility in a new and kind of fantastic way. So we've been at the cusp of this from the very beginning, and part of that is we started to understand what are the trade-offs, what are the fundamentals of how do you design these airplanes, what are the fundamentals of how do you design the motors and that technology, which is why we've really invested so much in the vertical integration of all of this, that we think that we understand this technology better than anyone else out there, that we understand what it takes to make it efficiently and make it economically, and with the power of Toyota, then make it at scale.
Now, originally, Eric, when your partnership with Delta was announced, and I think it was in 2022 when the airline had made an equity investment into your business, the vision articulated then was to launch in Los Angeles and in New York. This year, it's been pushed out. What was the cause of that delay? Is it product related? Is it regulatory issues? Is it concern that the consumer's not ready? What is the delay? And the reason I ask the question is to understand what factors may have changed and will change, perhaps looking out to next year as you look ahead to your launch in the Middle East.
Yeah, so of course, the most important, the critical factor in any commercial launch is FAA certification. And so we've got nearly 2,000 people at Joby, the vast majority of all of which are working on that FAA type certification. So type certification is a design certification. It essentially means the FAA has to agree with everything that percolates out of the safety regulations that are essentially written into federal law, and then building that audit trail to like every single component, every design, every test that substantiates the design, and then all of the manufacturing that goes along with that to make that so that you can get that certification. It's the same process that large aircraft have to go through before you can launch a new version of a 787, for example. So that is the process that we're in. We don't control that process end to end because it's a regulatory process, right? The FAA actually controls that process. We can control what the way we feed into that. So we've actually taken an approach where we've tried to be pretty transparent on our quarterly reports. We actually publish a kind of a scorecard that says, here's the 5 stages. We kind of have defined a little bit more granularly than some others do. What we think of as the 5 stages of certification. All of those stages actually have like very specific, tangible things associated with them, effectively documents that must be submitted as part of those stages of certification. And so we publish a scorecard effectively as like, how are we doing? Basically, how are we doing in terms of submitting this material to the FAA? How's the FAA doing on accepting that? And of course, there's some back and forth that happens whenever you have this kind of a regulatory process. And so that's really the approach that we've taken to be pretty transparent about where we're at and what is still ahead of us in terms of the work that has to happen. Now, one of the exciting things with this work that we're doing with Dubai is that actually with the equivalent of the FAA in Dubai, which is called the GCAA, they're actually taking a lot of the work we're doing with the FAA, and then they're kind of devoting extra resources essentially to review the final approvals as quickly as possible. So that is an opportunity. We'll see how it plays out, but it's an opportunity that those final approvals in Dubai may happen faster than the final approvals from the FAA, in which case we'd be able to launch and operate commercially in Dubai before we could in the US.
I can't let you go, Eric, without talking to you about Tesla, which has just done so much to bring electric vehicles and also automation to the top of the public's mind. Can we see a partnership with Tesla in Joby's future?
So we're really excited to have a partner like Toyota be backing us, and again with this new investment that we announced today, I think that partnership is even it's like the next step of depth that we're taking with them. So we're pretty excited about that. We certainly have been excited to welcome many ex-Tesla people into our company, and so much of our powertrain team is run by kind of early Tesla engineers that cut their teeth there, learned a lot of interesting things, but now are interested in how can they take those lessons and those skills that they've developed and take them to the next level, literally, with what we're doing with flying mobility.
Eric Allison, Chief Product Officer of Joby Aviation, thank you so much for your time. Come back soon.
Thank you.